Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you are, what time you are listening to this or watching this. My name is Winston, and this is the very first episode of season 2 of the Revenue Alignment podcast. I'm your host. And guys, it feels great to be back. We had a break for a while, but decided to jump back on here and do it for a second season. A lot of people have been asking me about it. So I truly appreciate all of you that have been listening, have given me a feedback in terms of, what you guys liked, what I could improve on. And really just some really great feedback on how much value this podcast has really, been delivering for a lot of people, which has got me really motivated, super excited to come on and do another season and probably even season 3. Let's see how that goes. But for the very first season, we're back. I wanted to really cover something which I think is important. And it's the whole idea of, being able to strike that balance between marketers getting the leeway that they need to execute and getting that CEO buying in terms of marketing, improving their value, because that's what the podcast is really all about, right? In terms of how can we educate marketers to prove their value at a C-suite level so they can get buying to get the type of budget that they need to execute and the creative freedom that they can execute the type of marketing programs, campaigns, initiatives that they want to. But it really got me thinking that obviously this isn't a one-way street, so to speak. That yes, I speak about a lot of the things that marketers can do and should be doing, rather than just saying never work for a CEO who doesn't get marketing. But how can we do a better job demonstrating and communicating the value that marketing has, so that we can build up what I call our marketing political capital to get the buy-in to execute how we really want to. And I've been thinking about this over the last couple of months. I mean, well, really for a long time. That I'm not oblivious to the fact that it's not just from a marketing standpoint in terms of the things marketers can do to do a better job of getting buying. I do accept the fact that there are instances where you have CEOs or C-suites who make it very difficult for marketers to actually execute how they really need to get that buy-in. And several stories that really highlights this point, I believe. So, like, for example, I remember I was talking to like an entry level, a junior level marketer, and she's telling me that as the marketing person within the organization, this is in a B2B tech startup company, and she's telling me that she's reporting to the tech lead within the company, meaning the person, whether you want to consider them the CTO, the CIO, director of IT, whatever title, but it's within that context of a IT role, right? And she's telling me that she's reporting directly to that person, and then that person reports to the CEO. And I said, well, that doesn't make sense. Like, how can a marketing person be reporting to the tech lead? That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, because a tech lead isn't going to really understand the nuances of marketing. A tech lead isn't going to be able to build out a marketing strategy based on certain marketing insights, based on certain customer insights, because all they really do is really know how to build the technology, and how that technology either helps the company to be more effective, more efficient at what they're doing, or do the same for their clients. Because there are certain nuances that marketing is not just let's start a social media page and make some posts there. Let's host an event and invite other people who we believe fits within our target market. Like, there's a lot of nuances to marketing. So that within itself didn't make sense to me. And to make things even worse, there was like a bit of block where she couldn't even get direct access to the CEO. And this, we're not talking about a company that like has 200, 500, over 1,000 employees. This is a company that I don't think they even have over 30 employees. So it's a very small team. So it I really couldn't understand in that instance. Or there was another instance where someone is telling these stories are crazy, where someone is telling me that they're working in a company, and there are other execs within the company, and they're having a marketing strategy meeting to determine the direction of marketing and what they need to do to execute from a marketing standpoint. But yet no one who is on the marketing team is actually in that meeting. Which to me, when I first heard that, I was like, what the, I can't really say, but that makes absolutely no sense to me, because how can you be having a marketing strategy meeting, right? A marketing meeting where there's no one that represents the marketing team in that meeting to say, well, yes, I believe we should do this, or giving their perspective, their insight like that. That it didn't make sense to me, right? And these are some of the examples where you have CEOs, where you have C-suites who are blocking the potential for marketing to really be effective within the organization. I mean, there was another instance where I was speaking with someone who is the head of marketing for a company, and that person is telling me that they don't have the right tools, the right resources, the right technology to really track the entire buyer's journey sales pipeline. So once they execute a particular campaign, that campaign generates leads, and those leads are passed to sales. It's like, that's it. There isn't a CRM, like a central CRM, like a HubSpot or a Salesforce, for example, where they can tap into that data to see, well, out of, let's say, for example, out of 1,000 leads that we were able to generate from this campaign, how many of them actually moved on to sales qualified opportunities? How many of them actually, sales team to be fit? How many of them actually converted to actual customers for the business? Because then it will give them an idea, like, in terms of the different conversion rates at different points throughout the buyer's journey, so they know that, all right, when it comes to lead gen, we're doing a good job here, but in other aspects of the pipeline, we need to improve the conversion rates at different points of the pipeline because we're falling short here. And how can we help sales? How can we support sales to help increase those conversion numbers, so that in terms of the marketing spend, the ROI for marketing spend is a lot more in terms of the revenue that's generated. I mean, I can even remember there was a point where a couple of years ago where I interviewed for a marketing position, and one of the things I asked the person who was the marketing lead for that company, like, how does marketing gather insights from customers to really make informed decision in terms of their marketing execution, developing messaging, positioning, value prop, and all that to improve it over time. And the entire idea was, well, marketing doesn't get to speak to customers. And I asked the person, well, what do you mean marketing doesn't get to speak to customers? I said, well, the only people who can speak to customers is the sales team and the customer success team. But I'm like, yeah, but how do we get insights? I'm like, well, we need to go to those people to gather those insights and to get that data. And I'm like, well, that makes no sense, because how a salesperson sees a potential client or a customer is different than how customer success, in terms of that insight, that data that they gather, it's going to be different, because sales is going to gather the insights to learn how can they convert deals much faster and actually generate higher value deals for their pipeline. Customer success is going to be focusing on the customer experience and how can they make it better to improve customer retention. That's something completely different than what marketing would be focusing on in terms of those insights to learn, as I mentioned, like which specific value prop really resonates with or target market or target customer. What specific ICP or segment of that specific ICP tends to generate the most revenue for the company. Like, what's the messaging or the positioning that we've seen that makes the most sense based on those customer insights, not based on third-party insights or third-party data from a third-party source. So it's examples like these where I talk about where you have C-suites who are more of a hindrance than a help to marketing. And then you have them that they say that marketing doesn't provide value. They don't see how marketing provides value. And I'm saying, well, if you don't give the people the opportunity to execute, if you don't give them autonomy to really deliver how they can deliver, how they need to deliver, then what you expect, that makes absolutely no sense to me. So I believe there is a striking of balance, so to speak, between CEOs giving leeway to marketing and marketers to execute how they need to. But then at the same time, based on everything that we've been discussing since season one, what can marketing or how can marketing execute to demonstrate and communicate and prove their value at a C-suite level, which we spoke about in length, with other guests from season one. You can go and check that out. And evening season two, we're bringing on some more and some new guests to discuss that as well. So I think in closing, there are two things that needs to happen right now, right? Because as I said, this isn't like a one-way street. It's a two-way. It's a collaboration. It's alignment between not just marketing and sales, but marketing and the CEO. Where I think from the CEO side, here's what needs to happen from the CEO side. The CEO needs to communicate to marketing what their expectations are in terms of, well, this is what we expect from marketing. This is how we think marketing should be delivering value. Which, I mean, the only thing in my mind, at least, from a CEO standpoint, where marketing really adds value is creating demand and driving revenue for the company. So even if you're focusing on brand, still think about how brand can help the CEO, the company, do those two things. Secondly, from the CEO side, I think that they need to give marketing the autonomy and the tools that they need to execute. And if you hire a marketing role or a marketing person to do the job, until they prove otherwise, trust that they can get that job done, right? It's not guilty until proven innocent, innocent until proven guilty. So give them the leeway, give them the autonomy, give them the resources that you can to help them to execute, to deliver results, and trust that the person who you hire can get the job done. Number three is allow time to execute, to deliver results, right? So don't give like a month or two and expect marketing to deliver results, because that's not how marketing works for the most part. I mean, there are exceptions and there are things that marketing can do to execute, to deliver results in the short term, which I'll speak about that in another episode. But for the most part, marketing will take time. So give them the time that they need, and that time shouldn't be dictated by the CEO. Marketing should know based on what they want to do, what they're trying to achieve, the planning, the preparation, the organization that goes into achieving that and executing that. How much time would they need to actually deliver on this? And the CEO should trust that they can and will get it done within that timeline. So that's from the CEO standpoint. From the marketer standpoint, I believe that marketers also need to set the expectation for the beginning in terms of what role does marketing play in the bigger picture in terms of helping the organization achieve its goals. What time will it take to get there, and to ensure that they agree, or the CEO agrees to whatever specific timeline that is agreed upon, or what marketing decides. And marketers, I would even go a step further. After you have that discussion with your CEO, actually send them an email that says, as we discuss, the expectations are XYZ. It's going, we're going to need these resources to get it done. And the timeline that we agreed on to execute on it is, X time, so that, it always happens. Inevitably, when the CEO comes back and say, hey, how come we're pouring into this marketing program or this campaign and we're not seeing results, then you can point back to that email to say, hey, remember we had that discussion where I sent you the email, and here's where you agree that this is a timeline that we're working with, so that you have something that you can back up to say, hey, we agree to this timeline, allow us the timeline to execute, to deliver what we need to deliver on. Number two, from a marketing standpoint, is I think marketers need to focus their marketing efforts on demonstrating value, not based on how marketing perceives value, but based on how the CEO perceives value, which I spoke about earlier in terms of, driving that demand, driving that revenue, and that every single marketing strategy execution that you do should do one of those two things, either, drive that demand, or drive revenue in some way, shape, or form. Even if it's not going to do it in the short term, it should still eventually lead to it. So if you're starting a podcast, for example, don't come to the CEO saying that this podcast can help us generate brand awareness and reach, and build community, because for a CEO that doesn't make them money. But instead, speak about how the podcast can give them access, or the sales team access, to certain key decision makers that they otherwise wouldn't have been access to, by inviting them to be a part of that podcast. Or talk about how, by speaking on certain topics on this podcast, it can build a brand affinity, and then that would help the time to close for certain deals. Or it might help, give us a competitive advantage, where when our potential clients, our customers, are considering us, then we're in the top 3 or the top 2 of that consideration set, right? The third thing is, don't expect the CEO to understand how a specific campaign or a specific program will actually lead to results. And this is a mistake I've made as well, where I put together a marketing plan or a marketing strategy. I'm telling the CEO how it's going to deliver all these things. But I think one of the biggest mistakes I made was I didn't really break down step by step, in terms of how what we plan to do will actually drive results and revenue for the company. And that's very important. And that's a mistake a lot of marketers made, something I've made early in my career. But you have to understand that it's not the CEO job to get marketing, and the CEO isn't going to get marketing. So believe it or not, you have to literally spell it out for them. Like, all right, we're going to start this podcast. Here's what we expect. Here's the timeline, step by step, how it's going to actually eventually deliver revenue for the business, and actually break that down. And you have to have that understanding and that marketing insights to know how you can actually projectize something along that. So don't just come and say, hey, we're going to start this thing and it's going to drive brand awareness, it's going to make the company a lot of money. No, actually, like, break down exactly how is that going to happen. And finally, you have to have certain metrics and KPIs to kind of track, while you're executing on this campaign, this program, this project, how well, until it actually leads to revenue, because it won't drive revenue right away, because as we mentioned, marketing takes time. So you need certain intermediary, if you want to call it that, KPIs or metrics, where you can point to the CEO to say, hey, here's evidence that this thing is working, and it's not a complete waste of money, or it's not a waste of marketing spend. Because you have to have something in place where you can actually provide some sort of data, some sort of insight to the CEO to show them that, hey, we're on track to actually achieving whatever business objective that we're going after as a result of this program, as a result of this campaign. And not just have it there in terms of knowing those KPIs, but communicating, having like sort of progress reports then, and communicating that. It's one of the things that I do when I'm working with clients, especially if I'm in direct communication with the CEO, with the C-suite, where I will send out weekly emails to them. Like, if we're executing a particular campaign, I would give them like progress update reports every week to say, well, this is what we did this week. This is what we plan to focus on for next week. If it's a campaign already started, we're actually executing, then we say, all right, this is what we executed on. This is the results for this week. This is what we're aiming towards for next week in terms of how we can improve those metrics. But basically, you have to keep that line of communication constantly open and constantly updating them, so that they don't feel like marketing is just spinning their wheels doing a bunch of stuff, but they don't know exactly what value that's delivering to the business, or if marketing is even on track to achieve those particular outcomes that the CEO and the marketing team agreed on. So that's my advice. That's some of the key takeaways that you can take from this episode. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again. This has been another episode of the Revenue Alignment Podcast. Next week, we will have our first guest. We're going to dive into it. Some really great stuff, some really great insights coming out of that episode. Can't wait for you guys to see it. Until then, take care and have a great day. This has been the Revenue Alignment Podcast.
Join us next week where we have more amazing content to help you demonstrate, communicate, and prove your value
at the C-suite level. I'm Winston, your host, and this is a wrap.